Welcome back, everyone, to the Blazor Hybrid Beginner Series. I'm your host, James Montemagno, a program manager on the developer community team here at Microsoft. Now, in the first video, we talked about what Blazor Hybrid is, what you can build with it, and how it works directly with .NET MAUI. And in this video, I want to show you how you can get your development machine set up with Visual Studio 2022 or Visual Studio Code, no matter where you're developing. So let's go ahead and get started. Now, the first place that you'll want to go is visualstudio.com. There it is. Now here, this will give you information about Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code. Let's first get started with Visual Studio here on Windows. There are many additions available, so if you already have a license for Pro or Enterprise, you're good to go. Download and install that. Or if you are looking to get started, you can use the free version for individual developers, academic users, and open source projects in the Community Edition. Just go ahead and click on that. Now this will download the Visual Studio setup, and you can click on it to open the Visual Studio installer. Once that opens, it'll look a little bit like this. It's going to show you all of the workloads that are available inside of Visual Studio 2022. For Blazor Hybrid development, we're going to want to select two different workloads. First is the ASP.NET Core and web development workload. This will give you everything that you need for web development so we can build our Blazor web apps. To build Blazor Hybrid applications with .NET MAUI, we're going to need to select the .NET MAUI workload. This will give us everything that we need for iOS, Android, Mac, and Windows, and it will also bring in the Blazor Hybrid controls as well. That's it. Simply click Install, and it'll give you everything that you need. Once that's done installing, you'll want to open up Visual Studio 2022. And we'll go ahead and verify that everything is set up and ready. I'll select New Project, and we can see that there are a lot of different project templates available: console app, web apps, APIs, class libraries, so much more. Here in the top right, we can filter this down. We can see Blazor, Blazor Hybrid, and MAUI applications, and everything else. If I select Blazor Hybrid, we'll see the .NET MAUI Blazor Hybrid app. So here we are now 100% set up inside of Visual Studio. We can create our project, and we can dive through the architecture. But before we do that, I want to also show you how to get set up inside of Visual Studio Code. So that means if you're running on Windows, Mac, or Linux, you can also do development there. So let's head back over to visualstudio.com. And here we can head and look at Visual Studio Code. I can learn more and head over to the Visual Studio Code page, and I can decide what operating system I'm running on. Here I'm running on Windows, so I can go ahead and select Install Visual Studio Code. This will super quickly install Visual Studio Code. Now at this point, there's no workloads to install. It just gives you the base Visual Studio Code install. And when it's done installing, we can simply open it and we get Visual Studio Code. This is our lightweight code editor. Now from here, if we want to get started building .NET MAUI applications, we're going to need to install the .NET MAUI extension. Now, Visual Studio gave us every single thing that we needed when we installed the ASP.NET workload and the .NET MAUI workload. It gave us the SDKs. It gave us an emulator setup. It gave us simulator connections. It gave us SDK management. It installed the .NET runtime automatically for us for development. With VS Code, since it's a lightweight code editor, we're going to need to install things manually, but Visual Studio Code and the extensions will guide us through the process. Here, I'm going to click on the extensions on the left-hand side, and we can search for .NET MAUI. Now here, we can tap on the official .NET MAUI extension here from Microsoft that you can see. Now, what's great about this is that it will walk us through in our little details here of how this works. It will not only install the .NET MAUI extension, but it will also install the C# and the C# Dev Kit extension as dependencies here. This will enable us to create .NET MAUI projects. It will enable us to debug them, and a lot more. Now, I mentioned that this is available on different operating systems, but it also means that based on where you're working, different SDKs and emulators are available to you. So if you're on Windows, you can do Windows and Android development. On Mac, Android, iOS, and Mac. And on Linux, Android development. So all we need to do is simply click Install. Now, from here, the .NET MAUI extension for Visual Studio Code will also install that C# and C# Dev Kit extension automatically for us. So this just takes a few seconds to download the extension and install it into VS Code. Now, also, the .NET MAUI extension and other extensions in VS Code are often getting regular updates. So you can see here that this is a preview, and you can even opt in once it's installed for additional faster updates as well. Here we can see that there's a pre-release version available. So if you want to be a little bit more on the cutting edge, you can always opt for that. All right. So here, our extension is installed automatically for us, and we are ready to go. Now here, we'll also want to scroll down and make sure that we have .NET installed. And that's really important. So here, this is telling us that this is required to install this, and also how to set up the Android SDK. Now, like I said, Visual Studio 2022 handled this all for us. So we're gonna wanna make sure that we do that here when we create our project. So we can go ahead and go to the terminal and see if you have .NET installed. Now I will, because I have Visual Studio 2022 installed. So I can say .NET -- version. And this is going to show me that I have .NET 8 installed on my machine. Now, if you don't have .NET or you get something that says .NET isn't here on your machine, you're going to want to go back to your browser and head over to .NET. And here you can click download and download the .NET SDK that's available for your operating system. Now you might need to restart Visual Studio Code, but once you do, you can write .NET -- version and it should show you there. Now from there, we'll want to install the .NET MAUI SDK as well. So I'm going to say .NET workload list. This is going to show me all of the workloads that are installed and where the installation source was. So here we can see that I have MAUI, iOS, Windows, Mac, Catalyst, Android, and more. If you don't have anything installed, you'll want to install the .NET MAUI workload by executing .NET workload install MAUI. This will give you everything that you need to get up and running. Now from there, like I said, you may want to close down Visual Studio and reopen it just to make sure everything is good. So let's just go ahead and do that just to make sure everything is configured automatically. And VS Code opens real quick. Awesome. Okay, so like we were able to create new projects in Visual Studio 2022, we can do the same here in VS Code by going to the Explorer and then tapping on the Create .NET Project button. Here, this is now going to show us all of our project templates based on what we have installed. So we can see here we have our Blazor applications, class libraries, and so much more. If I wanted to get started building the .NET MAUI Blazor Hybrid app, here it is at the very, very top. Once you have Visual Studio Code, the .NET MAUI extension, the .NET SDK, and the .NET MAUI workload, everything will be set up and ready to go inside of Visual Studio Code. All right, we're set up and we are ready to go. For this video series, I will end up using Visual Studio 2022 here on Windows to build out this application and show you the tooling that's built in to manage emulators, deploy, debug on the different operating systems. Now, from Visual Studio 2022, we'll be able to build for iOS, Android, and Windows directly on our Windows machine. For Mac, I would go over to my Mac and deploy there. So that's what we're going to do in the next video. We're going to go ahead and create our very first Blazor Hybrid application. I'm going to walk you through the entire architecture so you understand what's in the box, and then we're going to start building our user interface. So now that you're set up, let's get started building our first Blazor Hybrid application. So stay tuned.